What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Fight Talk. This weekend, man, a good fight in the featherweight division. Andre Fili versus Bill Algeo. We're gonna break down the fight, and I'm leaning towards Andre Fili slightly, only because of the potential chance of the wrestling, the takedowns. I think he's gonna be able to get a few takedowns throughout the fight, and it might win it for him and just edge it. But Bill Algeo, I was actually when I was first looking at these fights, immediately I was thinking of Bill Algeo, and I thought he was gonna win this fight by the unanimous decision due to the volume and output that Algeo has, the movement around the cage. I think he's gonna. I still think he's gonna force Andre Fili to reset it a lot of times, and Bill Algeo will sort of accumulate the shots and the output and work Andre Fili over the course of the fight. But after considering Andre Fili's ability to initiate in wrestling and grappling, like in a Sadiq Yusuf fight, man, like we've seen in a lot of his fights, he resorts to his striking. He stands, he strikes. He likes to beat up his opponents. Um, Uses his head kick and his body kick a lot in his fights. Powerful and like dangerous. It keeps his opponent obviously away and keeping him respecting Andre Fili's power. But in the Sadiq Yusuf fight, we saw him straight away in like the first 1-2 minutes. Due to Sadiq Yusuf's power, Andre Fili straight away went in for some takedowns, pushed him up against the cage, and really started working his wrestling. And I think in this fight, we're going to see Bill Algeo edge Andre Fili on the stand-up, I feel, due to his movement, the fact that he throws like a hella strikes, man. He's throwing like body kicks, like we was talking about it, and it's like he's pressing like at some points pressing just all the buttons on the pad, man, throwing some mad elbows, front kicks, side kicks. He ran off and threw like a side kick as he's running off, and he's just like he uses his length and he uses the distance well. He's able to keep the distance to his advantage. But I think looking at the Sadiq Yusuf fight for Andre Fili, I think that when it gets to that point, he's going to force the wrestling and the grappling. And Bill Algeo's takedown defense is not the greatest, man. It's not the greatest at all. He's all right. Like we saw him against Brito once they're working submissions and so on and so forth. He's got good submission defense, man. He escapes everything on Bill Algeo. See him under a lot of like submission threats, and he's getting out of all of them, man. Like from what I've seen of him, and like in the Brito fight, like in the Ricardo Ramos fight, obviously he escaped a lot of submission attempts, both of those fights, and but he gets taken down in it. He gets taken down quite easy at will, and I think that's going to edge the fight for Andre Fili. Leaning with him slightly just based off the wrestling. I mean, if he's able to stuff the takedowns, I think Algeo's in this one to win, but Andre Fili, I think he's going to get the job done just because of the wrestling. What do you think is going to happen, man?
Yeah, I'm not really sure who to lean with, in this one. Algeo, I like him. He's a good fighter. He's very active. He throws a lot of surprising shots, in from angles that you don't even think he can throw them from, or he finds them. He's very good at finding the shots. He picks apart his opponent. He outstrikes a lot of his opponents. He's very accurate. So he puts up a good fight all the time. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't stop working, and he also warms up later into the fights. That's what's good about him, and he saves his energy and speeds up as the fight goes on. Whereas Fili comes in explosive, and he gasses out. He starts to gas out later on as it goes on, so that might go against him, and Algeo can get it later on in the fight. But I'm leaning towards a little bit more towards Fili because he does have that impact. He does have the same output and is very active. His head kicks are dangerous. We saw that. His wrestling is great. He has great wrestling. Got good takedowns. So I think that will put more of the advantage over Algeo, and he will take it to the ground and maybe get a ground and pound. I don't see it finishing, but on points, I see Philly taking it, definitely. That's what I'm going with, Philly on points.
Both leaning towards Andre Fili here, I think, based on the wrestling. But in a close one, man, I think Algeo, like he's shown in a lot of his fights, got the ability to outstrike his opponents. Look at the Joe Anderson Brito fight. They're clearly better grappler than Algeo. Algeo was able to survive all of those attempts and bring the fighter back to his feet, where he started to really put a volume. He doesn't really got much power to say beat down, but he just out volumes his opponent. In Herbert Burns fight, don't really look too much into that fight, Burns, because Burns sort of defeated himself in that fight. Strange performance. Ricardo Ramos fight is what I like to take, what I like, what I look at, and you can take more away from that fight because you see him under a lot of adversity against a good fighter in Ricardo Ramos, and we really saw Bill Algeo, his will to win, even though he lost in that one. Um, even though he lost that fight, Bill Algeo will to win in all of his fights. It just shines through with him. So it's going to be a close one, man, I think. But Fili, both leaning towards Fili here. Let us know who you think is going to win in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and we're back to break down the rest of them.